The rift wasn't supposed to exist. I was just an exploratory officer on the Ecliptica, a deep space survey ship on a routine mission to chart uninhabited star systems. We weren't equipped for anomalies, much less whatever this was. The rift hung in the void, a gaping wound in the fabric of space. It swirled with chaotic energy, a storm of light and shadow that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The first time we saw it, none of us knew what to make of it. "Get this on the record," I muttered, my voice tight. My hands trembled as I adjusted the external scanners. "Already recording," said Reese, my co-pilot and best friend since flight school. Her voice was calm, but I could see the tension in her knuckles as she gripped the console. "What do you think it is?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But it's not natural." The rift was massive, easily spanning several kilometers. Its edges shimmered like molten metal, and the space around it seemed warped, as if gravity itself had bent to its will. No known celestial phenomena matched this description. "Captain Torres," I called into the comms. "You seeing this?" "I see it," Torres replied, her voice clipped. "And I don't like it. Hold position. I'm sending the science team to analyze the readings." The Ecliptica was a sturdy ship, built for endurance and long hauls, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. Something about the rift felt wrong, as if it didn't belong in this universe. Reese nudged me. "You're staring at it like it's going to eat us." "Maybe it will," I said, only half joking. The science team arrived on the bridge a few minutes later, led by Dr. Ewan Korvax, our chief astrophysicist. He was a wiry man with an intensity that bordered on obsession. His eyes lit up when he saw the rift. "Incredible," he murmured, practically pressing his face against the viewport. "This could be a spatial anomaly, maybe even a gateway. Do you realize what this means?" "It means we stay away from it," Torres said, stepping onto the bridge with her usual commanding presence. "We're not here to play with fire." "But Captain," Korvax protested, "this could be the discovery of a lifetime. Imagine what's on the other side." "That's exactly what I'm afraid of," Torres said. "We don't know what's over there, or what could come through." The debate was cut short when the rift flared, its swirling patterns accelerating. A low-frequency hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. "What's happening?" Torres demanded. "Energy spike," Reese reported, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's pulling us in." "What?" I snapped, gripping my chair as the Ecliptica shuddered. The ship's thrusters roared to life as Torres barked orders to the helm. "Full reverse. Get us out of here." "It's not working," Reese cried. "The rift's gravity is off the charts. It's like a black hole, but localized. Brace for impact," Torres shouted. The rift surged, and the Ecliptica was swallowed whole. When I woke up, the world was wrong. The Ecliptica had crash-landed on a planet that defied explanation. The sky was an endless expanse of dark, churning clouds, illuminated by flashes of crimson lightning. The ground was a sickly, pulsating black, as if the planet itself were alive. Jagged spires of obsidian jutted from the earth, casting long, menacing shadows. "Status?" Torres' voice crackled over the intercom, shaking me from my stupor. I staggered to my feet, checking my surroundings. Reese was unconscious beside me, a nasty cut on her forehead. "Reese is down, but breathing," I reported. "Systems are fried." "Where are we?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Torres said. "Get to the bridge as soon as you can. And watch your back. Something's out there." Her warning sent a chill down my spine. I shook Reese gently. "Hey, wake up. I need you," she groaned, her eyes fluttering open. "What happened?" "We went through the rift," I said, helping her up. "And now we're somewhere else." Together, we made our way to the bridge. The ship groaned under its own weight, the hull buckling in places. As we passed a viewport, I caught a glimpse of movement outside, a shifting shadow that seemed too large to be real. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Reese nodded, her face pale. "Let's move faster." The bridge was a mess. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the crew worked frantically to assess the situation. Torres stood at the center, her face a mask of grim determination. "Glad you two made it," she said. "We've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" I asked. Torres gestured to the main screen, which displayed the external feed. The rift was still visible in the sky, but it was smaller now, flickering like a dying flame. "It's collapsing," she said. "And if it closes completely, we're stuck here." "Can we reopen it?" Reese asked. "Not without figuring out how it works," Korvac said, his voice tinged with frustration. "And even if we could, there's something else we need to worry about." He pulled up another feed, this one showing the surrounding terrain. At first, it seemed empty, but then I saw them, massive, hulking shapes moving in the distance. "What are those?" I asked, my throat dry. "No idea," Korvac said. "But they're coming this way." The creatures were unlike anything I'd ever seen, towering, grotesque forms that seemed to shift and ripple, as if their bodies weren't bound by the same physical laws as ours. "They're drawn to us," Korvac continued. "I think the rift's energy attracted them." "Perfect," Torres muttered. As if crash landing wasn't bad enough. "We need a plan," I said. "Fast." Torres nodded. "We'll split into teams. Korvac, you work on stabilizing the rift. Reese, you're with me. We'll secure the perimeter. You," she pointed at me, "take a team to scavenge for supplies. We're going to need everything we've got to survive this." I didn't argue. There was no time. As I gathered my team, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound felt amplified. The planet wasn't just alive, it was aware. And it wanted us gone. The planet was wrong. I couldn't shake the sense of unease as my team and I trudged across the alien terrain, our boots sinking into the pulsing black ground. It wasn't soil, it was something organic, alive, and faintly warm underfoot. Every step was accompanied by a sickening squelch, as though the planet resented our presence. Our goal was clear: gather supplies from the wreckage scattered across the crash site and nearby terrain. The Ecliptica hadn't landed gracefully. The ship's debris was strewn over a wide area, some of it lodged in grotesque formations of jagged black spires. "Keep your eyes open," I said, my voice hushed. My team consisted of 5 people, including myself. Reese had stayed behind with Captain Torres to help fortify the ship, leaving me in charge of this mission. "Anyone else feel like we're being watched?" asked Carter, a junior technician with wide eyes and an even wider imagination. "Focus," I snapped. "We've got work to do." Still, Carter wasn't wrong. I felt it too, an oppressive presence pressing down on us, as though the planet itself had eyes. We reached the first debris cluster, a section of the Ecliptica's storage bay. The metal was twisted and scorched, but some of the crates were intact. "Start cataloging," I ordered. "We need food, medical supplies, and anything that'll help us stabilize the rift." While the others worked, I kept watch, my hand hovering near my sidearm. The alien sky churned above us, the crimson lightning casting eerie shadows. I scanned the horizon, my eyes narrowing as I spotted movement in the distance, those towering, grotesque forms we'd seen earlier. They were closer now. "Pick up the pace," I urged. "We don't have much time." By the time we'd gathered as much as we could carry, the creatures were alarmingly close. They didn't move like animals or machines. Their movements were erratic, as if they were glitching through reality. "Time to go," I said, slinging a crate over my shoulder. As we started back toward the ship, the ground beneath us began to tremble. A low, guttural noise rumbled through the air, resonating in my chest. "What the hell is that?" Carter whispered, his voice trembling. "Just keep moving," I said, trying to sound confident. The noise grew louder, a mix of growls and clicks that set my teeth on edge. The creatures were no longer just shapes in the distance, they were visible now, and they were horrifying. They had no consistent form. One moment they resembled massive, multi-limbed beasts, the next they shifted into abstract, nightmarish shapes that defied logic. Their surfaces shimmered like oil on water, and their glowing eyes seemed to pierce through us. "Run!" I shouted. We bolted, abandoning caution as the ground shook violently beneath us. The creatures moved faster than I anticipated, closing the distance with terrifying speed. "Don't look back!" I yelled, but I couldn't help myself. One of the creatures lunged, its massive form bending and twisting as it reached for us with tendrils that seemed to extend endlessly. Carter screamed, his voice abruptly cut off as the thing enveloped him. "Carter!" one of the others shouted, but there was no saving him. The creature absorbed him into its mass, his body dissolving into nothingness. "Move!" I barked, dragging the remaining crew members forward. The Ecliptica was in sight, its battered hull a beacon of hope. The sound of gunfire erupted as Torres and Reese opened fire from the perimeter, their weapons blazing against the encroaching horrors. "Get inside!" Torres shouted as we reached the ship. We scrambled through the airlock, and Torres slammed the controls. The door sealed with a hiss, cutting off the creatures, but only for now. The bridge was chaos. Korvax paced back and forth, muttering to himself as he pored over the data from the rift. Reese and Torres were reviewing the perimeter defenses, and the rest of the crew was either tending to injuries or securing what little we'd salvaged. "What the hell happened out there?" Torres demanded, her voice sharp. "Those things, they're faster than we thought," I said, panting. "We lost Carter." Torres' jaw tightened, but she said nothing. "We can't stay here," Reese said. "They'll breach the hull eventually." "We're working on it," Korvax interjected. "The rift is still collapsing, but I think I've found a way to stabilize it. Temporarily, at least." "What's the catch?" Torres asked. Korvax hesitated. "The energy signature from the rift is tied to this planet. Whatever's keeping it open is here. We need to locate the source and shut it down." "You want us to go back out there?" Reese asked incredulously. "We don't have a choice," Korvax said. "If we don't stabilize the rift, we're as good as dead." "Fine," Torres said, her voice steely. "We'll take a team and find this source. Korvax, you stay here and keep the defenses running. Reese, you're with me. And you," she pointed at me, "are coming too?" The planet's surface was even more hostile the second time. Armed with rifles and portable scanners, our team ventured deeper into the alien terrain, guided by Korvax's coordinate. The ground grew darker and more unstable, and the air seemed heavier, as if the planet were resisting our presence. "This place is alive," Reese muttered, her eyes darting around. "Stay focused," Torres said. "We're getting close." The scanner beeped, indicating a massive energy signature ahead. We crested a rise and froze. Before us was a monolithic structure, a massive spire of obsidian that pulsed with a sickly green light. The air around it shimmered with distortion, and the ground seemed to ripple outward from its base. "This is it," Korvax's voice crackled over the comms. "The source of the rift's energy. How do we shut it down?" Torres asked. "You'll need to get inside," Korvax said. "There should be a central chamber. Disrupt the core and it should sever the connection." "Easier said than done," I muttered, eyeing the spire. As we approached, the air grew colder and a deep, resonant hum filled the air. The shadows around us seemed to move, coalescing into shapes that resembled the creatures we'd encountered before. "They're guarding it," Reese said, raising her rifle. Torres nodded. "Then we'll have to fight our way in. Stay sharp." The creatures lunged at us from the darkness, their forms shifting and twisting. Gunfire erupted, the sound deafening in the oppressive silence. "Cover me!" I shouted, breaking into a sprint toward the spire. The others provided suppressing fire as I reached the base of the structure. A doorway yawned open, revealing a dark corridor that pulsed with the same green light. "Hurry!" Torres yelled, her voice strained. I didn't hesitate. Plunging into the spire, I felt the air grow colder, the walls seeming to close in around me. At the end of the corridor, I found it, the core. It was a swirling mass of energy, suspended in a crystalline structure. The rift's signature pulsed from it, strong and unrelenting. "Korvax, I'm at the core," I said. "Now what?" "Destroy it," he replied. I didn't ask how. Raising my rifle, I opened fire, the bullets shattering the crystal and sending a shockwave through the spire. The ground beneath me heaved, and the walls began to collapse. The spire was collapsing around me. Chunks of the alien structure fell like rain, each impact shaking the ground. The air shimmered with unnatural energy, and the corridor leading back to the surface seemed to warp and twist, as if the spire itself was trying to trap me. "Cores destroyed," I yelled into the comms, sprinting toward the exit. "I'm getting out. Hurry up," Torres barked. "The whole place is coming down." Ahead of me, the corridor was filled with shifting shadows, the twisted forms of the nightmare creatures coalescing out of the darkness. Their glowing eyes locked onto me, and I knew they weren't going to let me leave without a fight. I raised my rifle, firing in short, controlled bursts. The creatures recoiled, their bodies distorting and reforming as the bullets tore through them. But they didn't stop. The walls groaned, fissures spreading through the black, organic material. I could feel the spire's collapse accelerating, the structure buckling under the weight of its own energy. "Torres, I need backup," I shouted. "We're pinned down," her voice crackled back. "Hold your ground, we're coming." I gritted my teeth, my pulse hammering in my ears. The creatures surged forward, their movements erratic and unnatural. I fired until my rifle clicked empty, then drew my sidearm, aiming for the creature's glowing cores. Each shot found its mark, the creatures disintegrating into oily mist. But for every one I destroyed, 2 more appeared. "This is bad," I muttered, backing toward the exit. Just as I reached the doorway, the ground beneath me erupted. A massive tendril shot up, slamming into the wall with enough force to send me sprawling. My head hit the ground, and stars exploded in my vision. Dazed, I scrambled to my feet, narrowly avoiding another tendril that slammed into the spot where I'd been lying. "Torres, where are you?" I yelled, panic creeping into my voice. "We're almost there," she shouted back. I didn't have time to wait. The tendril reared back, preparing to strike again, and I did the only thing I could think of. I ran straight toward it. The creature hesitated, its movements sluggish and uncertain, and I took advantage of the opening. Sliding under the tendril, I sprinted down the collapsing corridor, the exit finally in sight. Outside, the storm had intensified. Crimson lightning streaked across the sky, and the ground heaved as though the planet itself was in agony. Torres and Reese were locked in combat with a swarm of creatures, their weapons flashing in the chaos. "Move!" Torres shouted when she saw me. I didn't need to be told twice. Sprinting toward them, I fired over my shoulder, the last of my ammunition spent as I reached the others. "Is it done?" Torres demanded. "The core's destroyed," I said, gasping for breath. "But I think we made things worse. We fought our way back to the Ecliptica, the nightmare creatures pursuing us with relentless fury. Every step felt like a battle, the ground shifting and writhing beneath our feet. When we finally reached the ship, Korvax was waiting for us at the airlock. "What the hell is going on out there?" he demanded as we stumbled inside. "The spire's gone," Torres said, her voice grim. "But it triggered something. The planet's falling apart." Korvax's face went pale. "The rift?" "Still there," I said. "But the energy signature's spiking. Whatever we did, it's destabilized the entire system. We need to leave," Reese said. "Now." Korvax shook his head. "The rift is our only way out. If we don't stabilize it..." "Forget stabilizing it," Torres snapped. "If we stay here, we're dead." The ship shuddered as something massive slammed into the hull. Warning lights flashed, and the sound of tearing metal echoed through the corridors. "They're breaching!" Korvax yelled. "Reese, get us airborne," Torres ordered. "Everyone else, to the weapon stations." The Ecliptica roared to life, its engines struggling to lift the battered ship off the ground. Outside, the creatures swarmed like a living storm, their forms shifting and merging as they tore at the hull. "Shields at 30%, Korvax shouted from the bridge. "Just get us into the air," Torres yelled, gripping the edge of the console. I manned one of the turret stations, my hands shaking as I aimed at the creatures clinging to the ship. The weapon fired a stream of plasma, vaporizing them in bursts of blue light. "We're not going to make it," Reese shouted from the cockpit. "There's too many of them." "We don't have a choice," Torres snapped. "Push the engines to max." The ship groaned, the strain audible as it clawed its way into the sky. Below us, the planet's surface was a nightmare of collapsing spires and shifting terrain. The storm raged with unnatural fury, the crimson lightning striking dangerously close to the ship. As we climbed higher, the rift came into view, a swirling vortex of darkness and light, pulsing with chaotic energy. "That's our exit," Korvax said, his voice tight. "Can we make it through?" Torres asked. "I don't know," Korvax admitted. "The energy levels are off the chart. If we don't stabilize it—" "We don't have time," I interrupted. "We either go now or we die here." Torres hesitated, her jaw clenched. Then she nodded. "Reese, take us in." The ship banked toward the rift, the creatures still swarming around us. The turrets blazed as we fought to keep them at bay, but it was a losing battle. "Shields at 10%, Korvax warned. "Hold together," Torres muttered, gripping the console. "Come on, hold together." The rift loomed ahead, its swirling energy filling the viewports. The ship trembled as we entered its outer edge, the turbulence threatening to tear us apart. "Brace yourselves," Reese shouted. The world dissolved into chaos as we plunged into the rift. The ship lurched violently as we passed through the rift, the cockpit's viewports consumed by swirling chaos. Light and darkness danced together, creating a kaleidoscope of impossible colors that threatened to blind us. My stomach churned and my vision blurred, but I forced myself to focus. "Status," Torres barked, her knuckles white as she gripped the console. Korvax's voice was shaky but functional. "Systems are barely holding. Shields are down to 3%, structural integrity at 50. We're leaking atmosphere from Deck 3. "Seal it off," Torres ordered. "What's on the other side of this thing?" "I don't know," Korvax snapped. "This kind of transition, there's no precedent. We could end up anywhere, or nowhere." The ship groaned under the strain, the sound of buckling metal filling the air. Warning lights blinked on every console, and a high-pitched alarm blared incessantly. Reese fought the controls, his face slick with sweat. "We're almost through," he yelled. Just as the turbulence became unbearable, the rift spat us out like a projectile. The swirling madness of the vortex vanished, replaced by the stillness of space. But this was no ordinary space. The stars were wrong, too bright, too close, as if we were trapped within a vast, cosmic mural. The void was tinged with an eerie, purplish glow, and faint tendrils of light snaked through the darkness like ghostly fingers. "What the hell is this?" Torres muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Korvax's face was pale as he scanned the readings. This doesn't make sense. The laws of physics, everything's different here." Reese's hands hovered over the controls, his voice trembling. "Look." Ahead of us loomed a planet, but it was unlike anything we'd ever seen. Its surface was a swirling mass of shadow and light, constantly shifting as though the planet itself was alive. Great, jagged spires pierced the atmosphere, stretching impossibly high. Rivers of glowing liquid coursed through the terrain, carving patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost intelligent. And then we saw them. Massive, coiled structures floated in orbit around the planet, their forms organic and mechanical in equal measure. They pulsated with a sickly, greenish light, emitting a low hum that we could feel in our bones. "Those aren't ships," Reese said, his voice cracking. "No," Korvax said, his tone hollow. "There's something else." "They're alive," Torres whispered. Before anyone could respond, a deep, resonant sound filled the ship, a vibration that wasn't coming from our systems. It was coming from outside, from the planet. "What is that?" I asked, gripping the edge of my console. "It's a signal," Korvax said, his eyes wide with fear. "Something down there knows we're here." Suddenly, the floating structures began to move, their coiled forms unfurling like massive serpents waking from slumber. They turned toward us in unison, their glowing cores intensifying. "We've got incoming," Reese shouted. "They're locking onto us?" "Evasive maneuvers," Torres ordered. Reese pushed the controls to their limits, the ship veering sharply as beams of energy lanced through the void. The first shot grazed us, sending a shockwave through the hull. The second narrowly missed, the energy beam slicing past the cockpit. "They're too fast," Reese yelled. "Return fire," Torres shouted. The Ecliptica's turrets roared to life, targeting the nearest construct. Plasma rounds struck the creature's surface, but instead of exploding, it absorbed the energy, its glow growing brighter. "Are you kidding me?" I muttered. "They're feeding off our weapons? We can't win this fight," Korvax said, his voice grim. "We need to get to the surface." "To the surface?" Torres snapped. "You're out of your mind." "It's the only option," Korvax insisted. "If we stay here, we're dead. If we go down, we might find a way to survive, or at least understand what we're dealing with." Torres hesitated, her jaw tightening. Then she nodded. "Reese, take us in." The ship dove toward the planet, the constructs in pursuit. The atmosphere was dense and turbulent, the glowing rivers casting eerie reflections on the hull. The constructs didn't slow, their movements unnervingly precise. "Shields are gone," Korvax shouted. "Hull integrity at 20%. Hold it together," Torres growled. The spires loomed closer, their jagged forms cutting through the swirling clouds. Reese navigated the ship with desperate skill, weaving between the massive structures as the constructs closed in. "We're not going to make it," Reese yelled. "Keep going," Torres barked. Ahead of us, a massive chasm opened in the planet's surface, its depths glowing with a pulsing, violet light. "There!" Korvax shouted. "Head for the chasm." "Are you insane?" Reese snapped. "Just do it," Torres ordered. The Ecliptica plunged into the chasm, the constructs hesitating at the edge. The walls of the chasm were lined with strange, crystalline formations that hummed with energy. The further we descended, the more the constructs seemed to falter, their movements becoming sluggish and uncertain. "They're stopping," Korvax said, his voice tinged with relief. "Why?" Torres asked. "I don't know," Korvax admitted. "But whatever's down here, they're afraid of it." As we reached the bottom of the chasm, the ship's lights illuminated a massive, circular structure embedded in the ground. Its surface was covered in intricate patterns, glowing faintly as if responding to our presence. "What is that?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "It's a gateway," Korvax said, his eyes wide. "Another rift?" The ship landed, the engines sputtering as they shut down. The air was heavy with tension as we stepped outside, the ground beneath us pulsating like a living heartbeat. As we approached the structure, the glowing patterns intensified, and a low hum filled the air. "This place, it's alive," Torres muttered. Before anyone could respond, the structure activated, a beam of light shooting into the sky. The chasm trembled, and the air around us seemed to warp and twist. Then we heard it, a voice deep and resonant, echoing in our minds. "You do not belong here." We froze, the words filling us with a primal terror. What is that?" Reese whispered. "It's the planet," Korvax said, his face pale. "Or whatever controls it." The voice spoke again, its tone cold and final. "Leave now or face annihilation." The structure began to shake, the patterns on its surface shifting into new configurations. The beam of light grew brighter, and the air around us crackled with energy. "We need to get out of here," Torres shouted. But before we could move, the ground erupted, and a massive, shadowy form emerged from the structure. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its presence was suffocating. "We're out of time," I yelled. We ran back to the ship, the ground collapsing behind us. The shadowy creature pursued, its movements slow but deliberate. As we launched back into the sky, the constructs above began to converge on the chasm, their forms twisting and merging into a massive, singular entity. "They're trying to contain it," Korvax said, his voice filled with dread. "Then let's hope they succeed," Torres muttered. The rift ahead flickered, unstable but still open. Reese pushed the engines to their limit, the ship rocketing toward the vortex. Behind us, the chasm exploded in a blinding flash of light, the shadowy creature's roar echoing through the void. We plunged into the rift, the world dissolving into chaos once again. When we emerged, we were back in familiar space. The ship was battered, barely holding together, but we were alive. What just happened? Torres asked, her voice shaky. We opened a door we were never meant to, Korvac said. And we barely made it out? As the stars stretched out before us, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't truly escaped. The planet, the constructs, the shadow, it was all still out there, waiting. And somehow, I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning.